The date was September 17, 1944. High above the Netherlands, at 14,000 feet near Eindhoven, history was unfolding in ways few had predicted. Operation Market Garden had begun, and it would become the largest airborne assault ever attempted. The Dutch landscape below was transformed into a vast landing zone where thousands of Allied aircraft moved through the sky like a coordinated swarm. Among them flew the P-47 Thunderbolts. Their wings sagged under the weight of ordnance that seemed impossible just a year and a half before. German pilots who scrambled to intercept these American fighters faced something they hadn't anticipated. These weren't light, nimble interceptors. The Thunderbolts carried 2,500 pounds of bombs each, nearly half the load that the massive B-17 Flying Fortress could manage on long-distance missions. How could a single-seat fighter carry such firepower? The aircraft the Luftwaffe had dismissed as clumsy and overweight in 1943 had become something revolutionary. It was one pilot, one engine, but it could fight to reach its target, drop the destructive power of a light bomber, then fight its way back home again. The P-47 had stopped being merely an interceptor. It had transformed into the most lethal fighter bomber in the entire European theater. And that transformation would reshape air combat forever. The tactical thinking that guided aerial warfare would never be the same. What stunned German military planners was how thoroughly American factories had reimagined air combat itself. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just a fighter or just a bomber. It was something entirely different. A machine capable of handling any assignment with devastating results. Back in April 1943, when this aircraft first saw combat, German officers studying it reached conclusions that seemed obvious from the technical data alone. The P-47 weighed 10,000 pounds empty, twice as heavy as the Messerschmitt Bf-109G. It looked powerful, certainly, but ungainly. Not elegant, not German. When the 4th Fighter Group flew the Thunderbolt's first official combat mission on April 8, 1943, German intelligence officers saw exactly what they expected to see. A massive Pratt & Whitney engine, an 18-cylinder radial called the Double Wasp, producing 2,000 horsepower initially, though later versions would generate 2,300 and eventually 2,800. This enormous power plant had to move an aircraft that seemed designed by someone who'd never heard of aerodynamic refinement. Early combat proved the Germans right, or so they thought. The initial combat radius stretched barely 125 miles. That severely crippled its ability to escort bombers. Its climb rate couldn't match German fighters, and when combat twisted and turned at medium altitudes, the Focke-Wulf 190 and the Bf-109 held definite advantages. German pilots quickly adapted their tactics, learning to force the heavy American fighter into tight turns and vertical maneuvers where weight became a disaster, where inertia ruled. But what German technical experts fundamentally misunderstood was that they were watching an aircraft still in its earliest stages, designed around capabilities that wouldn't fully emerge for months to come. The robust construction that made it heavy, all that steel tubing and armor plating, served a hidden purpose. It could absorb tremendous punishment. The wing pylons, originally meant only for drop tanks to extend range, had been engineered from the start to carry up to 2,500 pounds of ordnance. No other fighter of that era could handle such loads without suffering structural failure. The real change happened gradually, not from official strategy, but from what pilots themselves discovered. Through 1943, P-47 pilots on bomber escort missions began attacking targets they saw on the ground: railway locomotives, truck convoys, fuel storage areas. What they accomplished proved immediately successful. 8 Browning M2 machine guns, each firing 800 rounds per minute, created a storm of 0.50 caliber bullets. That meant 12.7 pounds of lead per second downrange, enough to rupture a locomotive's boiler in seconds, enough to shred an entire truck column. In November 1943, engineers officially installed bomb racks. They rated them for 500-pound bombs mounted on the belly and wings. On November 25, 1943, the 62nd Fighter Squadron conducted the first official bombing run with P-47s. Their target was Saint-Omer Airfield in France, a Luftwaffe base. 8 Thunderbolts, each carrying 2 250-pound bombs, arrived and attacked. When the dust settled, 2 hangars were gone and 5 enemy aircraft lay destroyed on the tarmac. That winter, Republic Aviation worked alongside Army Air Force technicians. The pace of modification quickened. Engineers strengthened the wing spars so they could handle unequal loads if a pilot dropped only one bomb. They designed new electrical systems for bomb releases that would work at 30,000 feet or just above the treetops. They created specialized gun sights, including the K-14 computing sight that calculated bombing angles for dives and glide attacks. By early 1944, the modifications had expanded far beyond simple racks and shackles. The M8 4.5-inch rockets arrived, each one hitting with the force of a 105mm artillery shell. Now a single P-47 could carry 10 rockets plus 2 1,000-pound bombs. That represented more explosive force than many twin-engine bombers had carried in the war's opening years. D-Day arrived on June 6, 1944. That single day made clear to German commanders exactly what the P-47 had become. Thunderbolts flew 1,985 sorties that day. They dropped 525 tons of bombs. They fired 135,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition. On the ground, the results were undeniable. 86 locomotives destroyed. Over 500 motor vehicles eliminated. 38 gun positions silenced. 17 fuel dumps leveled. The aircraft Germany had labeled mediocre, designed for high-altitude interception, had become the backbone of tactical air power. Günter Rahl was among the highest-scoring fighter aces in history, with 275 victories to his name. He flew against P-47s throughout 1944 and understood their capabilities intimately. Years later, in a 1996 interview, he described the moment he truly grasped what he was facing. The P-47 had diving speed that seemed almost supernatural. It could reach 1,400 kilometers per hour. His Bf-109 topped out around 1,000 kilometers per hour. When they chased him, he learned quickly that escape meant nothing. On May 12, 1944, Rahl's luck ran out. P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group shot him down. He lost his left thumb in that engagement. The damaged flying glove he wore that day now hangs in the National Air and Space Museum. After the war ended, Rahl flew captured P-47s at German fighter schools for about 300 hours, studying and evaluating how thoroughly Allied design had surpassed German capabilities. The P-47's ability to switch instantly from bomb carrier to fighter created a tactical nightmare for Germany. Enemy fighters sent to intercept what looked like vulnerable fighter bombers would suddenly find themselves in combat with aircraft that had just released their ordnance. Now pure fighters with superior firepower and astonishing toughness. The numbers alone told the story. A standard P-47 D-25 could carry different combinations. 2 1,000-pound bombs, 3 500-pound bombs, rockets and bombs together totaling 2,500 pounds. That equaled roughly 62% of what a B-17 could carry on extended missions, so calling it half a B-17's bomb load was reasonable. 16 P-47s in a squadron could deliver 32,000 pounds of bombs in a single day. That matched what 8 B-17s could carry. But here's where the math tilted decisively. Heavy bombers flying from England might fly twice weekly. P-47s operating from forward airfields could fly 3 missions in a single day. Theoretically, one P-47 squadron could deliver more tonnage in a day than a heavy bomber squadron delivered in a week. The difference in efficiency was staggering. One P-47 carrying 2 500-pound bombs needed 1 pilot and a handful of ground crew. One B-17 carrying 4,000 pounds needed 10 airmen plus extensive ground support infrastructure. The fighter-bomber delivered power with a fraction of the manpower. August 1944 brought the most impressive display of what the P-47 could accomplish during the Falaise Pocket operation. Between August 12 and 21, German forces tried desperately to escape from encirclement. They faced continuous P-47 attacks from dawn until dusk, with fresh squadrons arriving constantly to replace those heading back to rearm. The confirmed destructions were meticulously documented. August 13th alone saw 112 tanks verified destroyed. August 14th brought 287 confirmed motor vehicle kills. August 15 accounted for 42 locomotives. August 16 saw 89 horse-drawn vehicles eliminated. The 9th Air Force ran these strikes like a factory floor operation. As one squadron departed to refuel and restock ammunition, another arrived overhead. German forces couldn't move in daylight without getting attacked. Post-battle analysis showed that roughly one-third of all German vehicle losses in that pocket came from air attacks, with P-47s responsible for the majority. September 1944 introduced the 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rocket, the HVAR. Suddenly, P-47s became tank hunters. Each rocket carried a 60-pound warhead that could penetrate any German tank armor, even the fearsome Tiger and Panther models. A single P-47 could carry 10 HVARs, unleashing the equivalent of concentrated artillery fire in one attack run. The 360th Fighter Group pioneered the systematic destruction of German armor using these weapons. Their reports detailed the method precisely. Diving from 5,000 feet at a 30-degree angle, releasing rockets at 1,500 feet, they achieved direct hits on 30 to 40% of their launches. That accuracy surpassed what traditional artillery could achieve on good days. December 1944 brought the Battle of the Bulge and demonstrated that the P-47 had evolved into a true all-weather weapon. Freezing fog and heavy snow grounded most aircraft. P-47s equipped with British rocket rails and improved avionics kept flying. When weather briefly improved on December 23, Thunderbolts completed 647 sorties, claiming over 400 vehicles destroyed. Between December 23 and 27, the totals were remarkable. 201 German tanks destroyed, nearly 2,000 motor vehicles gone, over 950 horse-drawn vehicles eliminated, 89 locomotives destroyed, over 500 rail cars destroyed, 47 bridges damaged or destroyed. January 1945 revealed yet another P-47 capability. These aircraft could demolish bridges with precision that heavy bombers couldn't match. The 56th Fighter Group perfected techniques for destroying Rhine crossing points that had survived repeated heavy bomber attacks. 8 P-47s diving at 60 degrees could deliver 1,000-pound bombs with accuracy within 50 feet, vastly superior to high-altitude bombers that considered themselves successful if they landed ordnance within 1,000 feet of the target. The arrival of the Me-262 jet fighter in early 1945 should have changed everything. With a speed advantage of nearly 100 miles per hour, these jets appeared almost invulnerable to interception. Yet the P-47's transformation into a fighter bomber exposed a critical weakness. The Me-262 required long concrete runways. Fuel consumption was prodigious. The airfields themselves became primary targets for P-47 fighter bombers. On March 21, 1945, P-47s from the 365th Fighter Group found JG-7's Me-262s at Leipheim Airfield during takeoff. The jets, accelerating down the runway, couldn't maneuver or achieve the speed necessary to escape. 8 jets fell in 5 minutes, more than German factories could produce in a week. March 1945 brought Operation Clarion, a coordinated systematic destruction of Germany's transportation network. P-47s received assignments to patrol specific sectors with orders to destroy anything mobile or capable of moving. On March 22 alone, the results were staggering. 89 locomotives claimed destroyed, over 1,000 rail cars eliminated, 155 motor vehicles, 17 bridges dropped, over 90 rail cuts made. The P-47's continued evolution required relentless innovation. The D-25 variant, introduced mid-1944, featured reinforced wings rated for 3,000 pounds of external load, universal bomb racks accepting both British and American munitions, rocket launchers that reduced drag, improved cooling systems for sustained low-altitude operations, paddle blade propellers for enhanced acceleration, water injection that boosted power to 2,800 horsepower, and that sophisticated K-14 computing gun sight for accurate bombing runs. Republic Aviation's factories at Farmingdale and Evansville demonstrated extraordinary production flexibility. At peak capacity, they built 35 P-47s daily. 28 major variants were produced, and technicians developed 430 different field modification kits. The assembly lines hummed without interruption for 4 full years. Not once did production stop for a complete redesign. No other fighter manufacturer in the world achieved this remarkable feat. Those 48 months of continuous output represented something extraordinary in wartime industrial achievement. Yet manufacturing the aircraft was only half the battle. Teaching pilots to master this complex machine in multiple roles demanded entirely new thinking about fighter preparation. The United States Army Air Forces recognized early that the P-47 pilot needed vastly different skills than the traditional fighter pilot of just years before. They created comprehensive training programs that pushed aviators far beyond basic combat flying. Pilots had to log a minimum of 200 flight hours before ever seeing combat. Those hours weren't casual accumulation either. Aspiring P-47 pilots needed 50 practice bombing runs where they learned precision from altitude. They flew 20 separate rocket-firing passes, mastering a weapon system that demanded perfect timing and accuracy. The ground attack specialists completed 100 strafing runs, learning to thread their aircraft between anti-aircraft fire while raking ground targets with machine gun fire. Instrument flying consumed another 40 hours of their training. Formation flying required 30 additional hours, teaching pilots to maintain perfect discipline while flying wing-to-wing with dozens of other fighters. This wasn't mindless repetition. Every hour built specific combat capability. The contrast with German pilot training by 1945 was startling. Luftwaffe pilots were rushed into combat with just 110 flight hours total. Worse, they received virtually no training in fighter-bomber operations. The Germans kept their fighter pilots narrowly focused on aerial combat only. American commanders understood that tomorrow's air war demanded flexibility. Those rigorously trained American pilots proved their worth immediately. They handled high-altitude escort missions where thin air and extreme cold tested both machine and man. At medium altitude, they engaged in traditional fighter sweeps, dueling with German interceptors. When called to low-level work, they navigated at treetop height, reading terrain and avoiding obstacles at speeds that left no margin for error. They mastered dive bombing, dropping ordnance from steep angles that multiplied accuracy. They practiced skip bombing, an exotic technique where bombs bounced along the ground like stones skipping across water. Glide bombing came naturally once they understood the physics. Rocket firing added another layer of complexity. When napalm arrived in early 1945, pilots learned to deliver jellied gasoline that turned buildings and forests into infernos. The flexibility was breathtaking. The same pilot in the same aircraft could transition between roles within a single mission. Weather changed, switch tactics, target changed, adapt instantly, enemy fighters appeared, drop the ordnance and fight. This adaptability made the P-47 pilot something revolutionary in warfare. February 1945 marked the introduction of napalm to P-47 operations. The 150-gallon drop tanks brimmed with jellied gasoline that could incinerate entire city blocks in seconds. These weren't refined surgical instruments. They were weapons of terrible efficiency. The 360th Fighter Group made history on February 14, 1945. 8 P-47s headed toward the Reichswald forest, where German supply depots were hidden beneath the trees. Each Thunderbolt carried one napalm tank and a 500-pound conventional bomb. When they released their ordnance, the result was catastrophic. A firestorm erupted visible from 20 miles away. 3 acres of supplies vanished in minutes, consumed by flames that even the distant observers could see, lighting up the winter sky. By spring 1945, the P-47 reached its evolutionary zenith. The new P-47M variant screamed through the air at 470 miles per hour, matching early jet fighters for sheer speed. Yet this wasn't a speed demon with no range. The M variant could fly 2,350 miles with bombs aboard, meaning it could loiter over distant targets, deliver ordnance, and return home without desperate fuel management. The tactical employment possibilities seemed endless. The aircraft became far more than a weapons platform. P-47s operated as forward air controllers, coordinating attacks by other fighters. They served as artillery spotters, identifying targets for ground forces and directing fire. Photo reconnaissance variants carried cameras instead of guns. Communication relay versions acted as flying radio stations, extending range of ground communications. Some P-47s dropped propaganda leaflets, waging psychological warfare against a crumbling enemy. Pilots switched mission types with astonishing frequency. The same aircraft could fly 6 completely different roles in a single day. A pilot might start the morning as a bomber escort, transition to ground attack at midday, then finish the afternoon as a reconnaissance platform. The versatility seemed limitless. The production numbers tell the story in stark fashion. Republic Aviation built 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts total, making it the most produced American fighter of the entire war. The factory at Farmingdale, New York, turned out 9,086 aircraft. The Evansville, Indiana facility built 6,242 more. Curtiss Wright in Buffalo added another 354 examples. At peak production, the lines churned out 35 aircraft daily. This wasn't hastily assembled machinery. These were precision fighting machines, each one individually tested and verified. The cost statistics reveal brilliant industrial management. In 1942, each P-47 cost approximately $105,594 to build. By 1945, that figure had dropped to $83,000 per aircraft. This 27% reduction happened even as the aircraft gained new capabilities and improvements. That's genuine manufacturing excellence, not accounting tricks. The operational statistics dwarf most other combat aircraft. Pilots flew 746,000 sorties in P-47s. The loss rate was incredibly low at just 0.7% per sortie. When pilots did engage German fighters, they achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio. They dropped 132,000 tons of bombs and fired 135,000 rockets. The 50 caliber machine guns cycled through 119 million rounds of ammunition. In the European theater alone, confirmed destruction figures remain staggering. American pilots claimed 3,116 German aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat. Another 3,102 enemy aircraft fell to P-47 guns while vulnerable on the ground. The statistics for ground targets destroy all reasonable comparison. Pilots claimed 9,000 locomotives destroyed. Railway cars killed numbered 86,000. Motor vehicles reached 68,000 destroyed. Armored vehicles totaled 6,000. Even horse-drawn vehicles, still essential to German logistics, reached 60,000 destroyed. The P-47's transformation altered fundamental military strategy forever. Before the war, doctrine rigidly separated different types of aviation into separate boxes. Strategic bombing meant heavy bombers attacking distant targets. Fighter aviation meant air superiority, shooting down enemy aircraft. Attack aircraft meant specialized ground support planes. The P-47 shattered these neat categories. It proved that one aircraft could do all of these jobs simultaneously. It achieved strategic effects not through dedicated strategic weapons, but through relentless tactical application. The destruction of German transportation infrastructure by P-47s accomplished what years of heavy bomber attacks struggled to achieve. By April 1945, German forces couldn't move in daylight without being attacked. Supply lines simply ceased functioning. Reinforcements couldn't reach the front lines. The nation's military machine ground toward paralysis. Analysis by the Strategic Bombing Survey revealed the truth. Fighter-bomber operations, primarily by P-47s, reduced German rail traffic by 75% in forward areas by March 1945. This transportation collapse contributed more to German defeat than the destruction of factories and industrial targets by heavy bombers. Tactical aviation had become strategic through sheer accumulated effect. This revolution forced American military planners to completely rethink fighter doctrine. The Air Force's first official doctrine manual in 1947 stated plainly that the artificial distinction between fighter and attack aircraft has been rendered obsolete. All fighters must be capable of ground attack. All attack aircraft must be capable of self-defense. These sentences represented a complete reversal of pre-war thinking. The 1935 Army Air Corps Manual had declared that pursuit aviation's sole purpose is achieving air superiority through aerial combat. Diversion to other roles weakens this primary mission. This statement had guided thinking for years. The P-47 proved it catastrophically wrong. Mission flexibility multiplied combat power rather than diminishing it. A fighter that could only fight was half as valuable as one that could fight, bomb, and strafe. This fundamental lesson shaped every subsequent American fighter design. The P-47's concept proved so revolutionary that it influenced post-war aircraft design globally. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, the P-47's direct descendants dominated the skies. The F-84 Thunderjet and F-86 Sabre, configured as fighter bombers, controlled tactical air warfare. The multi-role fighter concept, pioneered by P-47 squadrons, had become standard doctrine worldwide. Republic Aviation's transformation of the P-47 represented American industrial capability operating at maximum performance. The company's founder, Alexander Kartveli, had designed the aircraft with exceptional strength margins built into every component. When the Army Air Forces requested a fighter capable of withstanding 6G forces, Kartveli designed one stressed for 12G. When they wanted 500-pound bomb capability, he engineered the structure for 2,500 pounds. This over-engineering proved absolutely crucial. It allowed field modifications that could transform the aircraft's capabilities faster than formal design changes could ever manage. The P-47 leaving factory gates in 1945 incorporated hundreds of improvements drawn from combat experience. Yet production continued without pause. The assembly lines never stopped. The production miracle unfolds in remarkable statistics. 15,683 aircraft delivered from the factories. 28 major variants produced throughout the war. 430 different field modification kits distributed to operational units. Peak production reached 35 aircraft daily rolling off the line. 2 plants operated simultaneously at full capacity. Manufacturing costs dropped 27% despite capability increases. The P-47's fighter-bomber concept directly influenced every subsequent combat aircraft. The F-84 Thunderjet represented the jet-powered continuation of P-47 philosophy. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was named explicitly after the P-47, carrying the ground attack mission forward into the modern era. The F-105 Thunderchief extended P-47 doctrine into the strategic realm as a fighter-bomber. Later aircraft inherited the same multi-role philosophy. The F-4 Phantom II made multi-role capability central to its design from the start. The F-16 Fighting Falcon began as a lightweight air superiority fighter, but evolved into the premier fighter-bomber platform. The F-15E Strike Eagle took an air superiority fighter and adapted it for strike missions. The F-18 Hornet was designed from inception as a dual-role fighter attack aircraft. The F-35 Lightning II represents the ultimate expression of P-47 philosophy, a multi-role aircraft designed to replace multiple specialized types. The template established by the P-47 remains valid. Build strong, build adaptable, let operational requirements drive capability evolution. The comprehensive training program developed for P-47 pilots established standards still followed today. Modern fighter pilots train for air-to-air combat, air-to-ground attack, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare simultaneously. The multi-role approach pioneered by P-47 squadrons became universal practice. The 200-hour pre-combat training requirement for P-47 pilots became the baseline for post-war air forces globally. Emphasis on instrument flying, formation tactics, and weapons delivery accuracy established professional standards that defined modern military aviation. These weren't arbitrary numbers. They reflected hard-won wisdom purchased with pilot blood. Luftwaffe veterans consistently identified the P-47 fighter-bomber as a decisive factor in Germany's defeat. Günter Rahl, who flew captured P-47s extensively after the war, provided crucial post-war testimony. In his 1996 HistoryNet interview, he praised the aircraft's comfort, reliability, and versatility. Particularly striking was his observation that the Pratt & Whitney engine had no oil leaks, unlike German aircraft that seemed to constantly weep hydraulic fluid and oil. Statistical reality supported veteran observation. By war's end, the Luftwaffe could muster only about 100 operational fighters on any given day, not from lack of production, but from lack of fuel, destroyed airfields, and logistics infrastructure obliterated by P-47s. The fighter-bomber had achieved complete paralysis of enemy operations. The economic efficiency calculations remain remarkable. The B-17 Flying Fortress cost $28,000 per ton of bombs delivered. The B-24 Liberator ran $24,000 per ton. The P-47 Thunderbolt delivered ordnance for just $4,200 per ton. Crew losses per 100 tons delivered told an even starker story. The B-17 lost 8.5 aircrew for every 100 tons. The B-24 lost 7.2. The P-47 lost 0.9 pilots. Ground support requirements per ton delivered were equally revealing. The B-17 required 47 ground personnel for every ton delivered. The P-47 needed only 8. The mathematics were undeniable. P-47s delivered destruction at 15% the cost and 10% the manpower investment of heavy bombers. The transformation from pure fighter to fighter-bomber, carrying half a B-17's operational bomb load, represents more than tactical evolution. It embodies American military genius for pragmatic adaptation. The Luftwaffe never anticipated this transformation because it violated their fundamental understanding of military equipment specialization. German doctrine emphasized perfection within narrow roles. They wanted the best fighter, the best bomber, the best attack aircraft, each a masterpiece of specialized design. American doctrine, shaped by industrial pragmatism, emphasized adaptability and efficiency. The P-47 proved that in modern warfare, flexibility beats specialization. When Luftwaffe pilots encountered P-47s over Eindhoven on September 17, 1944, they faced not merely an aircraft, but a revolution in military thinking. Those heavy, clumsy interceptors they had dismissed in 1943 had become instruments of destruction, not through superior performance in any single role, but through unprecedented versatility. The P-47's combat record in the European theater from 1943 to 1945 stands among the most successful in aviation history. Maximum speed reached 433 miles per hour in the P-47D variant. The later P-47M touched 470 miles per hour. Combat radius extended to 450 miles with drop tanks. Service ceiling reached 43,000 feet. Maximum bomb load climbed to 2,500 pounds. Production excellence shines through the statistics. 15,683 aircraft built. Monthly peak production hit 1,050 aircraft. Cost reduction of 27% over the entire production run. 28 major variants produced. Over 430 field modifications developed and distributed. Combat effectiveness delivered 746,000 sorties. Loss rate held at just 0.7% per sortie. Kill ratio reached 4.6 to 1. Bombs dropped totaled 132,000 tons. Ground targets destroyed exceeded 224,000. The Luftwaffe's failure to anticipate P-47 fighter-bomber capability reveals a profound truth about military innovation. The Germans, masters of specialized excellence, failed to recognize that Americans would blur the lines between fighter and bomber. They couldn't imagine an aircraft that excelled not through perfection in one role, but through competence across all roles. Every modern combat aircraft flying today incorporates lessons learned from the P-47's transformation. The heavy fighter that lacked maneuverability against more agile opponents became the aircraft that helped turn the tide of World War II. The 7-ton fighter that the Luftwaffe dismissed as too heavy to matter became the instrument of their destruction, not through superior performance, but through superior adaptability. The P-47 proved that in modern warfare, the victor is not who flies the most specialized aircraft, but who adapts fastest to changing reality. Failure to recognize this revolution cost the Luftwaffe air superiority, mobility, and ultimately the war itself. The P-47's transformation from interceptor to fighter-bomber remains history's clearest example of how tactical adaptation can achieve strategic revolution, and how failure to recognize that revolution can devastate even the most professional military force.